Good morning, my lords and ladies. How art thou? Thou art well. Does warm my heart to hear such news. Today I would like to share with you some castles and parts of castles. But since we cannot be together in our great hall, my wizard Merlin has assured me that he can take care of this for me through things called laptops, Chromebooks, and such not, that you will be able to see what I see. So I am trusting in him that this is true. So, without further ado, let's take a look at castles, shall we? Here we are at Bodiam Castle. It is in southern England. I went there on a trip a few years ago, so I would show you this on the wall of our great hall, but since we're not here, this is the next best thing. Bodiam Castle. You can see there's a moat around the castle right here. Goes all the way around. The moat was filled with water. It was also often the place where the garderobe waste would go. So you didn't want to go swimming in the moat. Here's just another picture of Bodiam Castle. You can see the crenellation at the top of the wall. The battlements has round towers. It also has square towers. Now they would build the round towers later. The square towers were built first. I think this one, they're just there in the middle. It looks nice, but early castles had square towers, but they found out they could dig under the corners and then they would collapse and people could sneak up around the corners. But in a round tower, they could not do that. Here's a close-up of part of the castle. The floors are missing that would have been there. They have, of course, collapsed or eroded, but you can see some of the narrow windows on the outside, bigger. This would be the arrow loop, so the men could shoot their arrows and be on this side or go over and shoot out that side. Some close-up of the crenellation at the top on the battlements. Here's a shot inside. You can see the floors are missing, multiple levels here of windows and doors. This was inside the castle. This was part of the Great Hall. You can see the arches that were built in. The roof has collapsed and is long gone also. So you got to kind of use part of your imagination, but you can see the great arches and the stonework that they had. This is looking down into the courtyard or the bailey. Lots of visitors the day I was there. You can see where the walls have collapsed on the side. One of these was the kitchen, one was the chapel, the Great Hall was another. Here we are looking out at across the moat and across the realm. Back here, the kingdom in the background. You can see the arrow loops, some windows on the tower. Outside, you can see down here, they were setting up for a tournament that day. That would have been where they would have had jousting and other festivities outside of the castle itself, the curtain wall. Looking at another tower from inside the battlements. A door, fireplace, arrow loop to your right. This is going down one of the towers. Of course, that railing would not have been there at that time. Some shadows on an iron door. Inside a hall where they would have had their dinner, not necessarily the Great Hall, but set up so you could see in the shield. A doorway in the castle. All about the garderobe. In medieval times, cloth was expensive. Most people only had one piece of clothing, so it was important to look after it. Unfortunately, there were moths who would eat the natural fibers in the cloth. To stop the greedy garment gobbling moths, people hung their clothes above the toilet. The smells from the toilet kept the moths away. It explains the name garde-robe, from the French meaning to keep clothes. How they discovered it? No one knows. There's a picture of the garde-robe. Does it remind you of a porta-pot or a porta-john you might have seen? Here is a close-up of the portcullis, the gate in the gatehouse. This gate would be lowered if there were people trying to break into the castle or your enemy was approaching. You can also see the wooden door below it right here. That was the second line of defense. This is in the gatehouse or the barbican. If you look up and you're outside the gatehouse, you would see these holes right here in the parapet, and those are murder holes. They could pour boiling water down on you, hot sand. Some people say they would use oil, but oil was very expensive, so they wouldn't have wasted it on pouring on your enemy. Just a close-up, another shot. And this is inside the gatehouse. These are murder holes. Someone would be above there pouring down hot water or hot sand through these holes, and it would seep into the armor through the joints and get inside the suit of armor and would burn the knights or the people attacking. Plus also, if you heard noise and you looked up, it would pour down into your eyes. So a good line of defense in those days. Here's a gate out in the garden. And some minstrels playing at the castle festivities. This is actually a different castle, but those are the minstrels of the time who would have entertained you at your festivities or even in the Great Hall while you were having a feast. I also wanted to show you some examples from the scholars from last year in their Castle in a Box project. So these are just going to show you some parts of the castle you might include on your own. If you need to pause the video or stop it because you've got something else to do, then do so and pick it up at a later date. So you can see these are all examples. This is inside the Bailey. She has them shooting targets, practicing. Here's a portcullis in the gatehouse. Here's the drawbridge on this castle. And in the back you can see the heavy wooden door after they pass through the gatehouse. That is what they would have come into. Here is just an overshot and a montage of castles from last year. So you can see we've got torches on the wall here, the drawbridge with this chains going up to lift it. Over here are some arrow loops carved into a castle, the inner bailey or the courtyard, a balcony, and a shot of a tower and what people did. Again, looking down at some of the castles that were brought in last year, so you can see got a wide variety of things going on. I'm not sure why there's a minion here. Someone must have stuck that in there after they had demonstrated it for the class or talked about it. And you can see some of them here are labeled. They've got the Bailey labeled. Here's the curtain wall, which is the long outer wall. Battlements up here with the crenellation, arrow loops, these narrow windows. This would be your keep. Keep things safe in the middle of the castle. That's where the king and the queen and their servants and the chef and everybody would live. The last line of defense, you can see a keep right here in the middle of this one, being kept safe. This would be your keep. The keep up here in those castles. So some ideas of what you might be doing on your castle. Here's a close-up of this castle. Now, of course, you don't have to do anything this fancy. Here's his drawbridge coming down around the moat. And they had stuck some foam on the side, but yours does not have to look like that. Here's one where they had put sugar cubes on top of water bottles to make the crenellation. Here was the keep in the back of the castle. Here's that tower again, and you can see the crenellation up here where the knights and the soldiers could hide behind and then lean out and shoot through the crenellation. You got some arrow loops in the bailey inside. The torches close up with the drawbridge. The arrows in the bailey. This one put some stained glass, and he included a chapel inside his castle. Lots of castles would have chapels. One with knights on top of the towers. You can see the moat, the drawbridge, crenellation, towers, the battlements protecting the soldiers. Another, the portcullis we saw earlier. Castle with its towers and a flag. Has a drawbridge and the gatehouse. Inside the stable. Just another view here. He used construction paper to make his moat. Painted the box. Didn't paint the towers, which is okay. Someone used bottles. I think they were coffee bottles, he told me. And here's his arrow loops. Some of them would look like crosses, a window, the battlements, drawbridge, a moat. Looking at another castle idea. So lots of ideas. Drawbridge, the door, looking at the curtain wall, just the outer wall, and here's their moat going around the outside. Just another castle. They used water bottles here. Turned them upside down and cut the top off. So lots of ideas here that I am showing you that other scholars used. Pointed out their drawbridge, the bailey. Some people had wells in there. Here's a picture of a well looking down on this castle. So maybe you can get some ideas from the scholars last year and what they did to make their castles in a box. I don't want you making a castle with Legos or using your Harry Potter castle. The idea is to use your imagination and create something from a box stuff laying around your house. You can see some of them were very plain and basic, and others were a little bit more elaborate. So whatever you have around your house that you can use is what we're looking for you to complete your castle in a box. I look forward to seeing those. Next week, I believe June 1st is the due date. Just take some pictures and send them to me or post them on our Google Classroom. All right, until then, go out and do great works.